News came out on Friday that the DOJ filed a brief with the 7th Circuit saying that Illinois' gun and magazine ban is unconstitutional. Now, originally, while a listing was made on Pacer, no one was supposed to have any access to the brief until Monday. We now have it in full, all 34 pages, and it is an excellent first step. And I do say first step because there is still lots of work to go. The brief starts with a quick review of Bruin and how only a few months after the decision, Illinois outlawed some of the most commonly used rifles and magazines under a so-called assault weapons ban that has gone relatively unchecked, though not for lack of trying on the part of pro-gun groups. As part of Trump's executive order to protect the Second Amendment, the brief states that there are 3 reasons why the court should reverse an earlier decision and grant a permanent injunction. Specifically, the brief addresses the court's decision in Beavis v. City of Naperville in 2023. It also points out that numerous states and courts have been violating Bruin and Heller all willy-nilly, and that according to a statement by Justice Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court plans to address in the next term or 2 these issues as written in Snope v. Brown. But that's whenever that is, not now. So, the brief states the DOJ has set out to address 2 issues: whether or not the Protect Illinois Communities Act violates the Second Amendment by banning firearms in common use, and whether or not it also bans mags and attachments in common use. Now, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty and read off some of this brief for you guys because it's a great argument, but first I would like to talk to you all about a different kind of brief. Gentlemen, sheath is not your dad's underwear. It's made for men who value innovation, style, and performance. Founded by U.S. Army veteran Robert Patton, Sheath has been tested in the harshest conditions and is engineered to keep everything, and I mean everything, in its place and eliminate chafing and sticking. It doesn't matter if you're at your desk all day or doing hardcore PT, you'll be cool and comfortable. Sheath is built to last with a money-back guarantee on your first pair. They even have bamboo fabrics to make sure there are no harsh chemicals or fabrics anywhere near your Joey. And I'm not going to lie to you, they look pretty nice. So don't just try it out for you, do it for the ladies. And ladies, they've got products for you too. And because Sheath is so awesome, you can use code LibertyDoll for 20% off your order at sheath.com/LibertyDoll. Too bad this sponsor wasn't around for the eggplant video. Under Heller, the answer is yes, that this law, plain and simple, bans common use firearms and accessories, and it seems that this DOJ agrees. However, in Beavis v. Naperville, the 7th Circuit declared that AR-15s and other semi-autos are militaristic arms that are not protected under the Second Amendment. The DOJ argues that the second extends to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, not just the ones around in the 18th century, which is correct. The DOJ states that while they mention ARs by name here, that they are applying this viewpoint to all common use firearms, though of course they say yes, common use, but not necessarily any weapon for any purpose, like say subs or cannons, which I say why not? But anyway, I digress. The AR, the DOJ argues, is in common use and thus cannot be banned. The Second Amendment does not allow the government to prohibit arms that are in common use among law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. The Supreme Court adopted that test in United States v. Miller, where it explained that the Second Amendment secures the right to possess arms of the kind in common use at the time. The court applied that test in Heller, holding that the District of Columbia could not prohibit the possession of semi-automatic handguns, the most popular weapon chosen by Americans for self-defense in the home. Then the court reaffirmed that test in Bruin, explaining that the Second Amendment protects the right to carry weapons that are in common use, as distinguished from those that are highly unusual in society at large. Only weapons that are both dangerous and unusual can be banned, says the court, and nothing in the Illinois ban fits that bill. The AR, even according to the Supreme Court, is the most popular rifle in the country, a proclamation made once again in the recent opinion in favor of Smith & Wesson in the Mexico lawsuit, and that opinion, by the way, was unanimous. Not only that, but they are almost always used for lawful purposes, with tragic mass casualty events being the outlier, accounting for only 1% of all firearm deaths between 1966 and 2023. This, too, is pointed out in the brief. It's almost like they've been watching gun YouTube. I am not so arrogant to think that I am on that list. Further, the brief states, this position fails as a matter of text, history, and precedent. The Second Amendment's Prefatory clause, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, certainly does not limit the scope of its operative clause, as the Supreme Court made clear in Heller. But the Supreme Court was just as clear that the Prefatory clause's text nevertheless announces one of the Second Amendment's purposes, and logic demands that there be a link between the stated purpose and the command. Although the militia-related purpose announced in the Second Amendment's Prefatory clause is not the only reason Americans valued the ancient right to keep and bear arms, the Prefatory clause's text did capture the purpose for which the right was codified, which was to prevent elimination of the militia. Not only that, but the Supreme Court in Heller confirmed that the militia-focused text of the Second Amendment's Prefatory clause fits perfectly with the individual right to keep and bear arms that is codified in the Second Amendment's operative clause. This Second Amendment's militia-related text, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, thus suggests that the government may not prohibit weapons simply because it considers them militaristic. The contrary claim that militaristic weapons fall outside its scope wrongly requires reading the Prefatory clause entirely out of the Second Amendment. The DOJ also points out that at the time of the Second Amendment, citizens were allowed and, at times, expected or even required to own all kinds of weapons in order to perform self-defense and militia duties, which means that an AR ban is not just against the Second Amendment's text, but also the historical tradition and precedent. So, things that you and I already know, but it's nice to see the DOJ reiterating these in a court case. As for the mags, the arguments laid out are basically the same, as well as saying that banning items like high-capacity mags puts an undue burden on a right, much like a tax on ink and paper burdens the freedom of the press. Even with a cute little footnote recognizing that while these laws and courts call these items high capacity, they are, in fact, the standard. Of course, the Seventh Circuit could still give this the finger, but at least the DOJ is taking an interest in the case, and in announcing this stance, it might be a good sign for the Supreme Court granting cert in Barnett v. Raoul, which deals with this exact ban. Look at that, talking legalese and underwear to you guys in the same video. You guys hit the jackpot today. Anyways, that is it for this video. Please do all the algorithm things. You know what they are. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and happy shooting.